Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video I'll be taking a look at some cancelled concepts from Thorpe Park Resort and Alton Towers. So if you do go on to enjoy the video, make sure to like, subscribe, anything that makes me know you guys like the content. As well as that, please do comment down below any video ideas you have for me, because I will 100% use them. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first ride on my list is a giant Schwarzkopf coaster. Now, this would have originally been placed behind or next to Corkscrew. Obviously, back then in 1991, Corkscrew was still there and would have been the biggest steel coaster in the world at the time. Now, no one really knows much about this coaster other than the layout from a couple of models and obviously planning permission, but it was supposed to entail 3 lift hills. Now, 2 of these lift hills were actually supposed to be located next to each other to fit the theme of a racer. No one really knows what theme this would have had, or what it would have become to be, but it did sound really interesting, and it is kind of unfortunate that it got stopped midway through production, because I think this could be quite cool. Obviously, if you're seeing the planning permissions or the model on the screen now, you can see the layout looks quite similar to something like Nemesis. Obviously, it's a completely different ride type, but I feel like this could have easily been Nemesis' contender if this was built beforehand. Moving into the second coaster I'm going to be talking about, and that is a Cross Valley wooden coaster. Now, at Alton Towers at the time, this would have been the largest coaster they had ever built. It was meant to stretch from what was Ugland all the way to Forbidden Valley. So if you've ever been to Alton Towers, you will know that is quite a large area, and it's also said that it would have reached up to drops of up to 200 feet, which is around the height of Stealth if you've ever been to Thorpe Park. And that is an absolute huge scale. Obviously, this would have turned the tides completely for what we've got at Alton Towers at the moment. Obviously, if it's going from Ugland all the way to Forbidden Valley, we may not see what we've got in, the Dark Forest now. We may not even have seen Wicker Man. Obviously, if they had a big wooden coaster there already, it is kind of unlikely that they would have built another one. And obviously, this would have actually been a really interesting concept to add to the park. Obviously, no one really knows what this would have been or how it would have been laid out. Obviously, because that, like I said, that is a huge area to put a coaster in. And it also would stretch between the 2 areas, which nowadays at Alton Towers might be kind of hard, plainly because they like to theme their different areas, and having something, cross between the 2 could be a little bit weird in that front. However, this did look like a really interesting coaster, and probably would have, changed the tide of coasters we see at Alton Towers today. Unfortunately, it was shelved though. Obviously, this would have been because of noise complaints. Obviously because of the height as well. If you didn't already know, Alton Towers is a conservation area, so there's strict rules that they have to follow when building and planning their new coasters. It can't be over the height of the trees, which really does restrict them, which does mean that obviously rides like the Smiler, Oblivion, Nemesis are all dug into pits to allow that sort of similar height, they're not allowed to go above the trees. And obviously noise complaints, they've had a lot of problems with noise complaints in the past. There was some very heavy noise complaints with Oblivion when that first came out, and overall this ride would have created loads of problems and just wasn't really worth the risk for Alton Towers. Away from Alton Towers now, and we are going to head over to Thorpe Park. Now, Thorpe Park, way back in its history, planned to build 3 man-made islands. One was for Project Dylan, which is obviously Saw the Rise. One was for Project LC12, which is the Swarm. And then they left the other one empty. Now, the plans for these 3 areas were almost fulfilled. Obviously, like I said, we had Saw the Ride in one of them, we had Swarm in the other. But that does leave Site A little bit exposed. Now, if you've ever been on the Swarm before, as you go into the brake run, you will see that quite openly large space of land, and that is actually Site A. Now, obviously, Site A, B, and C were obviously Swarm, Saw, and what this coaster was originally going to be. No one really knows too much about what this coaster would entail. However, it was supposed to be around the height of Swarm, almost getting to the height of Stealth, which could have been really cool. But the plans were scrapped. Now, obviously, this was supposed to release around about the time that Dan Brown's Ghost Train was released, so it's highly likely that they swapped this coaster for Dan Brown's Ghost Train, which I bet they're regretting a bit now. However, obviously, like I said, this could have been a very cool concept, and yeah, it's unfortunate we didn't see it, but we could potentially be seeing these plans re-emerge fairly soon if Thorpe Park do want to create a new coaster, and that is why I think Site A is the most likely place we will see a new one. On to something that is quite well known to people who go to Alton Towers quite frequently, and that is Secret Weapon 1. Now, if you didn't already know, the secret weapons are the code names for all the different coasters at Alton Towers, and way back, way back before Nemesis was even built, there was actually supposed to be a different roller coaster in its place, and this would have been an aerodynamic coaster. Now, obviously, if you didn't already know, Secret Weapon 1 and 2 were original plans for Nemesis, and then obviously Secret Weapon 3 came along and hit the nail on the head pretty much, and that was the most successful coaster I think they'd had in years. And yeah, this coaster was supposed to be an aerodynamic coaster. Now, not a lot of people liked this sort of idea. It's quite a weird coaster. These Arrow pipeline coasters, they are quite weird. And that really did show when John Wardley went out and rode the prototype and said it was very boring and it just wasn't thrilling enough. And obviously that was John Wardley's main goal. He just wanted to make a coaster that would bring joy to people and would be really successful for the park. And obviously, he's not just going to go there and say, oh yeah, that's fine, just put it in. He's a person that really does care about this stuff. And I would recommend going and listening to or reading his book that he did publish a couple of years ago, because it does hold a lot of stories and he's a very extraordinary man. Now, if you don't know who John Wardley is, who I've just been rambling on about for about a minute there, he's basically one of the used to be, you know, one of the big designers for Alton Towers. He's designed rides like Nemesis, Air, all that sort of stuff. He was involved in it, and you know, he was really big part of Alton Towers history. So like I said, definitely go and read him up, because he's a very good man. So yeah, back to the Arrow pipeline coaster. So this was meant to obviously be in Forbidden Valley. Obviously, like I said, this is basically Nemesis, but not Nemesis. It is basically Nemesis, but it would have been an Arrow pipeline coaster. And yeah, like I said, it wasn't only the reason why John Wardley thought it was boring, the fact that it wasn't really commenced. It was mainly because of, like I said, of the height, the noise. That was a big problem for Alton Towers in its early days. Obviously, they've fixed a lot of that now, and they sort of, you know, switched on their brains when Nemesis was built, and they decided to dig down instead of, you know, going level. So it was a very big problem beforehand on what they could do. It was very restrictive. However, it is very sad to see that a lot of these rides just don't exist. Obviously, there are a lot of work and effort put into these rides you know, building it. So it's kind of sad to see that a lot of this stuff isn't really coming to the park and has been wasted. However, let's move on to the next thing, which I think is pretty big and will surprise a lot of people. Okay, so moving on to quite a big sort of cancelled idea. Now, this was originally going to be a B&M standing coaster that was originally going to be situated around Katanga Canyon. Now, if you don't know what these types of rides are, they're basically you stand in a restraint rather than sit in it. And they're quite, you know, unique and quite weird coasters, but they do look a lot of fun, and it's kind of sad that we didn't see this come through. However, John Wardley said that this would have costed a lot of money and would have been quite a big problem for the park financially. However, doesn't mean to say that we still can't get our hands on some info about it. Like I said, there's not really much, you know, plans, where there's not really much to say that this really went forward any more than just like a drawing board. Because obviously, like I said, most of this stuff gets scrapped really early on. So I don't really have any plans to show you for this one, only really a tiny bit of information. However, you know, this could have been quite cool. Imagining what this could have been. You know, circling Katanga Canyon, we could have seen some like jungle themes. Even John Wardley said it was supposed to dive into a rock at one point, which is really interesting. So, you know, it could have been quite a cool coaster. Like I said, Katanga Canyon is sort of themed to like a jungle, sort of tropical place. It's kind of a weird theme, and I think a coaster like this could have really fit in there. And this possibly could have replaced Smiler, because this was set to open in 2013. And yeah, if we saw that, we probably wouldn't even see the Smiler. So, you know, there's some wins and there's some losses on this, but I do really think it could have been a cool coaster. Okay, so lastly, moving on to something that is not actually a ride and potentially something bigger. Now, back in the late 1980s, Two Swords, who obviously owned Chessington at the time, they'd literally just built that, were thinking of making a theme park located on Woburn Safari Park. Now, this could have really changed everything we know about theme parks right now. Obviously, with Alton Towers being their pretty much next project after that, they obviously bought that out. If they had built this park where they wanted to build it and when they wanted to build it, this could have become a serious threat. Now, a lot of the stuff that was originally planned for this park, coming out of John Wardley's mouth, said that it would have been, you know, very, very similar to what they were planning to do at Alton. So obviously this would have been a huge threat and would have very, very much, you know, really, you know, put us in a different perspective at this point. Like, imagine not really knowing that much about Alton Towers, and Alton Towers been on quite a lower scale, and then instead of when we go up to Alton, we don't go to Alton Towers, we got a Woburn Safari Park. It could have been a very, very sort of interesting concept. However, these were scrapped, and obviously they did buy Alton Towers. Now, you know, this is quite a big thing to think about. The more you think about it, the more you just think, oh, that could have been pretty cool, but also pretty bad for Alton Towers, because, you know, their funds would have gone straight down. But nevertheless, like, it didn't happen. We've got Alton Towers, and I'm happy with that. But to be honest, like I said, most of this would have been very similar to Alton Towers. So would we even really know what Alton Towers is at this point? Would it even be a relevant thing? Like I said, very, very creepy to think about, especially with what, you know, Alton Towers has achieved in the last couple of years. That could have been completely changed. But that is it for today's video, guys. I hope you did enjoy. Like I said, definitely comment down any video ideas you've got, and I will definitely take them on board. So, without further ado,